had about a 3-year journey through Toastmasters, and when I was trying to prepare for this speech today, I thought that there's a lot of reflection that came up for me, and I hope that this is something that, whether your journey is just about to join on, or if you've been here longer than I have, it means a little something to you, because there's reasons you come here. Maybe you first joined, a lot of people, I think Andrew was teasing this morning about how Davida said, you need to show up and see what this is about, right? But then you showed up and you're like, well, it's more than just getting to know a few people. There's really good people here to get to know. Christy makes a great point, and it's kind of apropos that I follow your speech today. There are things that we get out of chamber groups, networking, that are in nature, but there's a different reason I think we become Toastmasters. This presentation out of Successful Club Series is called Evaluate to Motivate. And candidly, the first time I had to give an evaluation, I was feeling a little hypocritical. There's 2 big red buttons I have in my life, and hypocrisy is one of them. I don't like it when people are victims, and I don't like being a hypocrite. So as I was standing up here the first time to evaluate somebody's speech, I'm a little uncomfortable, and I'm thinking a little bit, probably like, evaluating Nick or Davida or somebody who was tenured as I was coming in here. What in the world could I say that's going to be helpful to somebody who's been around a while? It's a little unnerving to me. Candidly, Toastmasters expects that you do a couple speech projects so you have a context, you might have a few ideas to offer. There's a little bit of a cadence to the process, so maybe it's worth having some experience, but sooner or later you're going to evaluate somebody who, like me, I think, damn it, they're so much better at this than I am. How in the world am I going to not feel hypocritical, right? Well, today I hope helps you a little bit. If you can get past the hypocrisy, what you realize when you're a Toastmasters is we all come here to learn, and in order to learn, you got to get feedback. So sooner or later, you're going to have to give somebody feedback because you're getting the gift of feedback from somebody else. So get past your hypocrisy, North, and figure out how to do something that will be of value to people. When you're given evaluations, the idea is we're going to get feedback immediately. We've all talked about how the first half of our meeting is presentation. By the time we get to the second half of our meeting, that's the gift of Toastmasters. The reason it's organized that way is when you get feedback immediately, it starts to sink in. You have a context. You remember what you did. You're like, okay, that's something I could do differently. It's the same thing with that damn little clicker when you're not giving a speech. Thanks for not doing this right now, Betsy. The idea that that thing becomes present, you start to hear it even when it's not around. So if you get immediate feedback, that's more valuable. You want to offer methods to improve, and there's a little art to this we'll talk throughout the presentation today. When you're trying to give people feedback, how do they hear it? And Christy talked a little bit about trying to find some kind of rapport, because whether it's coaching, whether it's evaluating, it's kind of the same thing, right? They're up there trying to showcase some skills. There's some things everybody can build on when they walk in. There's other things that probably you're looking to improve on. I can remember when I was thinking about this, the very first time I was up here, I might have spoken a little faster than I do now, which is probably still too fast. I'm sitting in my chair, I'm already sweating, my heart's pounding, and I haven't even started my speech yet. By the time I get up on stage, I'm like, okay, I'm on full-on flop sweat. This is hard, but there was things, and Davida was the one that reminds me, when she's standing up here evaluating my first speech, she liked my smile. All it took is for her to say something was right for me to go, okay, I can do this. She liked my smile. That doesn't mean I did anything right, but she liked that I smiled when I was up here. Right? So when you're thinking about this, think about things you can build on, think about methods for improvement. And the idea of commenting on my smile is the idea of building on their self-esteem. I challenge you to watch anybody that stands up here, regardless of how good or bad they are, and not find something you couldn't say, that's a piece I'd like to emulate. Right? If I could showcase what they do, and I keep picking on our word of the day, that's something I'd like to try to do better. I could pick from almost anybody in this crowd and say, I can think of it, I won't go through them all. I could find something from every one of you that I'd like to emulate. If you can comment on those things when you're evaluating, it helps draw the speaker in and makes them recognize you're talking to them, that there's things you're getting in that are of value. And Agnes, if I could just do this the same way you do, I'd be so much happier. So that when you do offer methods that they could say, maybe consider for improvement, they're invested, right? They're hearing you and they're wanting to see what you have to say because it's become personal and they recognize they've got something to offer as well. So when the evaluator talks, what do? Well, the speaker's got to be listening. As I'm commenting on this, and as Christy was talking about in her coaching, we've got to find that common ground. If, as I'm evaluating, Tamla's evaluating me right now, if she's looking at her phone or she's staring out the window, what did you say you were thinking about grocery lists? That's probably not going to make me feel like that evaluation is going to be as meaningful. So as you're the speaker and you might be watching your evaluator, be conscious that the evaluator might be watching you. Okay, so I have to be engaged. I have to be thinking about what they're saying. I want to put myself in the position of the speaker so that I understand what they're going through. Not unlike you guys' role play, right? You were trying to put yourself in Colin's position thinking, okay, well, 2 or 3 years into this, I was dealing with the same problem. It's the same thing when we evaluate. Put yourself in that speaker's position. That will make it so that the speaker wants to listen. Ways to prepare. When you think a little bit about what it takes to get ready for this, we all have a speaker's guide, right? And I think I've commented as Toastmasters before, every speech in the book has a set of objectives in a little blue box that's on the first page of that project. If you understand what somebody's trying to accomplish, you may have never worked out that manual yourself before. It helps you have like a yardstick. It gives you something to measure with. If you understand what those objectives are, you might also ask them, you know, what do you want to find out? You've probably practiced the speech. Is there something you particularly want me to listen for? Is there stuff that you have concerns about? If I know going in, and I'm evaluating Jeff's speech, that he's worked on this and he thinks this is going to be harder, it helps me kind of get in tune with what he's saying, and it'll make it easier for me to evaluate. So if there's any concerns he's got, I'm aware of those walking in. So if you have that discussion with the person you're evaluating before, I should say the speech you're evaluating before, you never evaluate the person. The speech you're evaluating before you begin, it'll make it a whole lot easier for you to give meaningful feedback, because you don't necessarily want to evaluate the world if the person that's speaking is really focusing on one thing. Now, as an example, I heard Davida speak. I heard her compete. When she came in here and practiced her competition speech before she went on to compete at districts, I had the unfortunate privilege of, again, being hypocritical and evaluating somebody who I think speaks better than me. So I was trying to figure out, what would I ever say about this speech to make it improve? Johnny B. Boring's a good speech. Man, I love that speech. Okay, well, she's up here trying to figure out how to get ready for something, so I've got to find a way to give her a nugget. And what I remembered about that speech, and it's funny that I picked on Davida twice because she gives me a lot of feedback too, she had 3 great pieces of story, and there was no transition between them. So how do you get there? And I think all I could think of that day was, you know, make it a day in the life. But as you're sitting down and being an evaluator and you're clued in to what the person's trying to say, you'll have some kind of an idea, and I'll give you some before we're done, around things you can do that make that speech a little better. Transitions might be one of those things. She was in a really good place with that speech. I would have liked her to see take first place as opposed to first runner-up, but to be fair, we had some good competition out that day, and I think that the evaluation that I gave did help in the way that she gave a speech that didn't have better transitions. So make sure that you understand what they're trying to get done, what their concerns are, show that you're interested during it, and then put yourself in their position as they're speaking it. So this is where all my nuggets come in. For those of you that haven't had a chance to evaluate yet, or maybe for those 2 of you that are looking to do this competitively soon, maybe there's more of you out there after we're done today. As I mentioned when Davida said, I liked your smile. If there's something you can build on, that's something to take away, right? So when you're looking at how you're going to evaluate somebody, choose your words carefully. And first, let's start with, you know, the kinds of things that might turn a person away. I want to make sure, Agnes, as I'm doing that role-played evaluation, that I have you invested before I start telling you things that I might like you to consider. So there's some things I want to stay away from. You didn't do this, or you failed to do that. You should have done this. Those things probably going to take your audience and close them up. You don't want that. So avoid the words that you choose that would sound maybe a little too critical. Maybe focus on things that are a little bit more opportunistic, things you might consider the way you felt, so that you could say this might even be more effective. If you can take at least an average or better performance and take it from a 6 to a 10, that's somebody who wants to know, how do I do that? If you're saying it's a 6 and then people are like, you know, I only want 5, so you gave me a 2 on that evaluation that one time, Larry, and I'm never going to forgive you. That doesn't work as well, right?
That actually happened.
It did actually happen. But it was a 2 out of 3, not a 2 out of 10. Just so that the rest of the audience knows. Here's a few ideas around things you can comment. Last week you were evaluating, correct? And you were talking about hand position. Right, so I'm horrible at this, and I remember, as I'm carrying a clicker around today for a different reason, Cindy Newbern used to tease me that I was the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And that stuck with me. It stuck with me a lot because I do this a lot. I don't have a huge range of motion. I'm not very gregarious when I'm up here. So how do I get away from that? Well, all it takes is having a meaningful evaluation to remember that, and it sticks with me. So talk about body position, talk about your hands, talk about people's facial expressions. I've seen several people come up here and tell stories about things that were very emotional, and you can see them start to well up. That's worth commenting on, right? Because you're very sincere when you deliver that. That's a technique people might have to work on. You have it naturally. You can comment on that as a positive. Tone, tempo, things I struggle with, right? I'm kind of monotone. I kind of talk a lot fast. If I was to sit down and think about Becky's keyboard, if I could use that whole range, imagine what I could do. So if you find somebody who has that capability, comment on it. Those are all things you can say, even if somebody hasn't figured out how to do the things they want to write in speaking, that they have already in the bank. They've got something as a foundation to build a house on. It's something that they can build from. I commented on the smile. I think that there's a couple people in here, and Nick and I have teased about this a couple times. You know, we're like the antithesis on pauses, right? You use pauses very well. I wish I had the patience to pause and have an effect. I don't. I want to fill that gap. You know, you leave me a gap, I'm gonna drive like a Mack truck through that thing, right? But when you're trying to work on humor in particular, you got to be patient. You got to watch the audience and say, okay, they got it, they've reacted, and now it's time to move on. I'm horrible at that. But there are people out here that are really good about that cadence, their pauses, how they time their humor. Something I like a lot is the organization that goes into a speech, right? So Toastmasters, I think I've commented on this once before, they said, if I'm thinking before I walk in what I want you to walk away with, that tells me what I want to conclude. We'll take that conclusion, turn it into a question. That question becomes my opening. Now give me 3 things to support it in between. That's a good organization for a speech. You're going to get effective communication out of that. So I like organization. So when people do that right out the start, I think, Jeff, when you did your speech number 2, that was exactly what I took away from it. That was an organize your speech. It was organized. That's applicable on any other project you wind up doing. The other thing I like a lot is a meaningful topic. So it may or may not have been structurally delivered the way that a person would have wanted to attend. But you can always stop and talk about what the speech meant to you. Did you like it? Did it make you think? Did it make you reflect? So I like a one-on-one style. When I'm talking to the person I'm evaluating, Andrew, when I was listening to your speech, it really connected with me on this level. Here's what I liked about the whole thing. If I can use the person's name, Davida, I think, also does this well, right? She'll start out by saying, Toastmasters guests, and my new best friend, and that immediately draws you into who she's talking to, and then she starts into a one-on-one speech. Those are tactics I've seen in different places as well that seem to be very effective, because if your goal is to give a person feedback, you kind of want the rest of the room to melt away so that we're just talking, because then it looks like we're just talking and it's not as threatening, right? I'm not on the Toastmasters stage anymore. I don't think I've been keeping up with my clicker, so somebody that's evaluating me can tell me I can keep up over here. Closing. Perfect. One of the other things Toastmasters tends to teach, if you've been around for a little while, is they like the old Oreo. You want the cookie, the cream, and then the cookie. You want the positive, you want the negative, then you want the positive. If I've invited you in with the positive, and I can give you a little bit of feedback, then I can close with something positive so you stay motivated, right? So that idea of a sandwich is something that's worthwhile. Even in your evaluation, stay organized. You probably have been taking notes during this whole thing. There's a couple key points you want to make. If you lead with a positive and you fill in a little bit of an opportunity and you close with a positive, somehow in there still needs to be some organization. Something else I think that's really helpful in terms of that last closing statement, especially as people are starting out in some of their earlier speeches, if you've liked what you've done, Betsy, what was your speech last week? Was it number?
Wordplay?
Wordplay was number 4? Number 2?
Number 2.
Wow. So what did we say when you were done, right? We look forward to your next one. Right? That's motivational. It makes a person say, okay, I need to go in that calendar. I need to sign up for another speech because they want to hear it, right? That's the kind of progress we're looking for when we close out. One of the final things I like to do, and there's a lot of folks that they're in a club that sits down by the airport, a bunch of millennials, people I don't often interact with. I'm talking to you at this point now, Monica. They share with me stories every time that take me out of my day in, day out and make me think differently. And when I walk out of there, inevitably, regardless of how I was frame of mind when I walked in, I'm thinking differently. So when a person communicates with you in a way that compels you to act or to reflect, we all stand up here and go through these projects for a given reason, right? We're working on any of the things that are in the Competent Communicator Manual, our tone, our organization, our humor, right? That's a functional way to speak. And if we do it well, we'll have a well-organized, well-presented speech. But all by itself, unless there's good, meaningful content, it really isn't effective communication, right? So I like, regardless of how functionally well the speech is done, I like to comment on how they've communicated with me. If they've told me something that I'm going to take away and act on, because that's ultimately the point of why we're here, right? If I can get past my hypocrisy, anybody want to know what this really says? Then I can make a point you'll walk away with. And as a CenturyLink employee,
you can't get that with cable.